You can see from the outline where we Moses talking to the children of Israel. They're about to go into the land. This is their graduation speech. It's also the renewal of the Mosaic covenant. And so he's in this center section of what the actual covenant is, and he's to the part that's called the 19 to 26. This is how our society is going to work. And this is, I've referred to this as case law. If this happens, here's what you do or don't do. When this happens, here's what you do and don't do. And so today we're going to see, let me count them. 21, I think, something like that. 21 separate, if this, then do this. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through this list twice. The first time I'm going to show you how I've organized it on this page. And the second time through, what I'm going to do is we're going to fill in that right column. We're just going to put one word in that right column that says the basis. So, but we need to go through it once for you to figure out so you can see how I'm coming up with that word. We're going to put in there. So, on the subject of case law, where I was first introduced to the idea of case law, some of you may know our daughter went to law school. And we went back for her graduation, and we were there a few days early, so we actually got to sit in on a class. And it was a class on case law. And so the idea is that you have the Constitution, that's the basis for our law, legal system, but then cases come up as to, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about something else? And I remember two things about that class. One, we were in a classroom, these are all future lawyers, and there are, I don't know, 100 people in the room. It's a big auditorium that slopes down to the front, and we're in the back, and this is now the era where everybody has a laptop. So what you're staring at, we're behind, and you're staring at row upon row of people with laptops. The professor is doing the illustration, and I got distracted by watching the people there, because the students, because I saw at least 4 or 5 games of solitaire going. I saw people, searching the internet for this or that, having conversations with other people, So it was interesting that more than, it was sort of like an insight into the class and the people of the class as well as the professor. But what I do remember about his illustration was he gave a famous example of in early America that was one of the first case laws, and it had to do with a farmer who was selling a cow to another farmer, and the guy bought it with certain assumptions as to what's true about this cow, and I don't remember the details. I just remember that after the sale, he discovered that the cow wasn't what he thought the cow was. And so the question is, who's at fault here? Is it the person who is buying the cow, who didn't do due diligence, buyer beware kind of idea? Or is it the seller who had an obligation to tell him the certain situation of the cow? And the point is, it depends. It depends on what the situation is, and I don't even remember in this case who was right in the situation, but that's how case law gets built up. Okay, so now think about Moses. He's making this talk. He's had how many years to build up case law? 40 years in the wilderness, right? He's had 40 years of people doing stupid things and him having to decide who was right and who was wrong in this process. And presumably with God giving him direction specifically. And so what you have here are inspired things for the nation of Israel. This is how our society is going to work, and these are case examples. So when you read them, you tend to get buried in the detail. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to look at the detail, then we're going to back up a level, and I think it'll be a whole lot clearer when we get done. In my Bible, I think the heading for this section is called, let me find it again, Sundry Laws somewhere. Okay, so let's start with the first one. So I've given, each one of these is the case. So you see the column there that says, in this case. And the first one is, I've summarized as your neighbor needs help. And there's 4 examples of how your neighbor needs help. So let's start. You shall not see your countryman's ox or his sheep straying away and pay no attention to them. You shall certainly bring them back to your countryman. So that's the first case. You're wandering out, you're near the Darjanis, and one of their animals is wandering away. You have an obligation to bring it back to the Darjanis. You can't just ignore it, okay? And then you can just see the wheels turning and them saying, but what about this one? If your countryman is not near you, or you do not know him, what then? So so the first issue is, here's an ox an ox or a sheep, and you find them and you know where they go, so you take them back there. But what if you don't know where they go, or you don't know who they belong to? What do you do then? Well, you take it to your house and you care for it until he comes looking for it, and then you return it to him. So it's even a step further. Okay, well, what if it's not one of those? What if it's a donkey? I mean, what if it's harder to deal with than the other two? I'll pause here and tell a story. I think the best illustration for this, there's a story about a Chinese guy, and someone came to him and began talking with him and asked him what his name was. And he said, my name is Yanni Johansson. And they said, how did you get the name Yanni Johansson? And he said, well, I was immigrating to the country, and we were in line, and as each person came in line, they said, the guy taking the notes and admitting you to the country would say, what's your name? And he said, the guy in front of me said his name was Yanni Johansson. So the guy wrote down Yanni Johansson, said, welcome to America, Yanni Johansson. So then they turned to me and said, what's your name? And I said, Sam Ting. Same thing. That's how he got the name Yanni Johansson. Welcome to America, Yanni Johansson. So, this illustration, what happens if you see an ox or a sheep? You help your neighbor. What if you don't know? Sam Ting, help your neighbor. Okay? So, the next one. What if it's a donkey, or what if it isn't an animal at all? What if I just find somebody's garment in the road? Sam Ting. Okay? It's going to be all 4 of them. Okay, verse 3. Thus you shall do with his donkey, and you shall do the same with his garment, and you shall do likewise with anything lost by your countryman which he has, and which you have found. You're not allowed to neglect them. Okay, but what if they're not lost? What if they're just in trouble? I come across this guy, and he and his donkey's fallen down, and he's trying to get him up. Guess what? Sam Ting. Okay? You help him. You shall not see your countryman's donkey or his ox fallen down on the way, and pay no attention to them. You shall certainly help him to raise them up. Okay, so 4 different examples, all case law, saying if your countryman needs help with anything that's lost or he's in trouble with, and you're in a position to help, you help. So I immediately thought about this. I was thinking about Jeremy, and he's teaching on Titus and talking about good works. And I'm thinking, okay, the case law, you're good at hospitality and you see somebody in the church who needs help with the hospitality, that the hospitality would be good. And so you say, oh, this is right in my wheelhouse. I think I'll go help. So that obviously applies. What if it doesn't have to do with hospitality? What if it has to do with something else? Same thing. So I think even though the illustration here is a farm setting and it's Israel, there's definite application to us in the process. Okay, so now we go to a whole series that are all, well, most of them, so that are all two separate things. So, and typically what happens is don't mix this and this. So, but let's read them. So the first one is, a woman shall not wear man's clothing, shall a man put on woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. So that's one. Don't mix gender apparel. The next one is a bird and eggs. If you happen to come upon a bird's nest along the way, in a tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young or the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall certainly let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, in order that it may be well with you and you may prolong your days. So take one and not the other. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, that you may not bring blood guilt on your house if someone falls from it. So in that era, what they did is they built houses, and on the roof of the house was a place to go out and walk in the cool of the evening, remember? And so if you're going to walk on the roof of your house, if you're going to have a space where you can go walk, that's a dangerous place. So you put a fence around it. You put a rail around it. That's just what you do because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so now there's a whole bunch of mixtures. 22:9. You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, lest the produce of the seed which you have sown and the increase of the vineyard become defiled. So one vineyard has one kind of seed. You don't plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a material mixed of wool and linen together. And then as an add-on on clothing, making clothing, so first you don't mix materials, but you do make for yourself tassels for the four corners of your garment with which you cover yourself. So let's stick a finger there and let's go back to Numbers 15. Because he says you're going to make tassels here, but he doesn't say why. Numbers 15 does say why. And this is a direct command. Numbers 15:37. The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, tell them that they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and they shall put on the tassel of each corner a cord of blue. And it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord as you do them, and not follow after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you played the harlot. In order that you may remember to do all the commandments and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. So what's a tassel for? It's a reminder. It's kind of like having the string tied around your finger. You look at that and you remember why you did that. Same thing. In this case, you remember the covenant. You remember what God's done. Okay, let's go to the other side of the page. 22:13. Okay, so this is the racy section of the chapters today. So the next 5 what ifs are cases in which a man and a woman have relations inappropriately. So here's the 5 examples of what happens when a man and a woman have relations. And in each case, what's going to happen, the man being the aggressor, what's going to happen is at least one of them is going to be punished in the process, and in some cases both of them. And the punishment is normally, but not always, death, okay, stoning. So the first one is a man accuses his wife of infidelity before marriage. So here the story is he's married, and after he's married, he says, wait a minute, she had relations with someone before me. So he's accusing her of not being a virgin when they were married. So if a man takes a wife, goes into her, and then turns against her and charges her with shameful deeds, and publicly defames her and says, I took this woman, but when I came near her, I didn't find her a virgin. And so then the father and the mother go give evidence. They basically do a trial. And so the elders of the city, go down to verse 18, shall take the man. Verse 17, behold, he's charged with shameful deeds, saying, I didn't find your daughter a virgin, but the evidence, here's the evidence, and they'll spread out the garment. So the elders of the city shall take the man and chastise him, and they'll make him pay a fine of 100 shekels, give them to the girl's father, because he publicly defamed a virgin, and she shall remain his wife, and he cannot divorce her all his days. And that will not be a happy marriage. So he's punished basically for the rest of his life. But if the charge is true, that the girl was not found a virgin, then they'll bring her to the doorway and they're going to stone her. So it's a capital offense. Okay, so the second one, verse 22. So what happens if verse 22, if a man is found lying with a married woman, and they're discovered, then both of them shall die, the man who lay with the woman, and thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. Then they go to, so one is the married couple, one is a man and a married woman. The next couple are going to be someone who is they're engaged, but they're not yet married. What about that? And so the first one is the man has relations with a betrothed girl, and so what happens is, the question is, when it happens, when he forcibly took her, was she in a position to call out for help and have somebody hear her? If it happens in a place where there can be no witnesses, then he is, let's read it in 20, so the first example is she's in a city, and so she has opportunity to cry out and opportunity for someone to hear her, and if she doesn't, then you'll bring them both to the gate of the city and you stone them both. The girl because she didn't cry out, and the man because he's done the violation. Verse 25, if it happens outside the city in a place where she can't call out for help, then she gets the benefit of the doubt. He dies and she doesn't. Okay, so the next one is, what if it happens and she's not engaged? So we're just going through all the possibilities here. So man comes and has relations with a girl who's not engaged yet, then guess what? You just inherited a wife. So he winds up paying a fee, a dramatic fee, for the privilege of buying his wife. She now becomes his wife, with never a possibility of divorce. So you want to bypass this whole process? Here's what happens to you. And the last one is a man who has relations with his father's wife. Again, capital offense, kill them both. Because not only has the man and woman committed adultery, but he's also shamed his father in the process. Okay, so all of those have to do with relations and with all something relative to the status of the marital status. And that's an important thought, okay? So now we're going to go to the last section, chapter 23. So this is, the first 8 verses are all about who can enter the assembly. So this is talking about people who want to participate in the spiritual life of Israel. So who is it that can come and participate fully? So one, if there is a eunuch in the first one, a man who's emasculated, he can't. If it's an illegitimate birth, he can't. So the examples are the emasculated, illegitimate births, Ammonites, Moabites, Ammonites and Moabites to the 10th generation. Okay, how long is 10 generations? 300 years. So if you're the 10th generation of descendant, then we'll let you in. Up until that, absolutely not. That's how hated the Ammonites and the Moabites because of how they treated Israel when Israel was to come into the land. But the Edomites and the Egyptians were helpful, so they can come in after the 3rd generation. Okay, so you can't come in, and your son can't come in, but maybe your grandson gets in, okay? So now we're to 23, verse 9. When you go out as an army against your enemies, you shall keep yourself from every evil thing. So what I've said from this, the point is, when you go to war, all the moral rules that apply to you as a citizen still apply to you in war. Just because you're out in a situation where it's a kill or be killed setting, that doesn't excuse you from obeying all the things that are the right things to do. Okay? So the next 2 have to do with uncleanness, nighttime uncleanness, and the solution in 10 and 11 is to isolate and clean. The next one is if you're outside the camp and you have to go relieve yourself, you take a shovel and you dig a latrine. It's interesting, the discussion after this. Let's read 12 to 14. You shall have a place outside the camp and go out there. So you don't just squat down in the middle of the camp, you go outside. You shall have a spade among your tool. Shall be when you sit down outside, squat, i.e. You shall dig it up and turn it to cover your excrement. Why would you do that? Since the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and defeat your enemies before you, therefore your camp must be holy, and he must not see anything indecent among you, lest he turn away from you. In other words, you're going to treat that like holy space, okay? Because this is a part of the covenant that you have with God. Okay, 23, verse 15 and 16. You shall not hand over to his master a slave who has escaped from his master to you. So in other words, here's a slave, he's been mistreated, and he's looking to you for help. He comes to you and says, please save me. I need help. So one of the choices is, in American history, the solution, the law would have been that this person is owned and you're required to return them, right, to the owner. But under Jewish law, you shall not hand him over. He shall live with you in your midst in the place in which he should choose in one of the towns where it pleases him. You shall not mistreat him. So he gets respect and doesn't get returned. Okay. Doesn't it seem like an odd collection of things? Here's the next one, cult prostitution. It basically says you won't participate as a cult prostitute, and anybody who does and makes money for that, that's never to come back as an offering. That's not only is it forbidden, but the offerings and wages for such are also forbidden. Okay, 23, 19, and 20. You shall not, and the heading on my Bible says this chapter is protection for the weak. You shall not charge interest to your countrymen. interest on money, food, or anything may be loaned, or anything that may be loaned as interest. So if someone comes to you and needs help, they need money, they need clothing, your countryman comes to you, you're supposed to loan it to them and accept payment back just what you loaned them, no interest. And then verse 20 says you can do that to a foreigner, you can charge interest to a foreigner, but you can't do it to a countryman. 21, when you make a vow, so this is the next to last one here. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for it would be sin in you, and the Lord your God will surely require it of you. However, if you refrain from vowing, it would not be sin for you. You shall be careful to perform what goes out from your lips, just as you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised. So what he's saying is that if you make a vow, you've just entered into a contract. Okay? You've made a covenant. And you better do it. And if you can't do it, you better not make the vow in the first place, because you're obligated to keep it. Okay, the last one is neighbors, grapes, and grain. And what it says is that when you go out to your neighbor's field, and it's okay for you to sample some of the grain, to take a few grapes and sample the grapes. But you can't take a vessel with you. You can't harvest his grapes, but you can sample his grapes. Same thing with grain. You can go into the field and sample some grain, but you're not supposed to take a sickle to it. Okay, so let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 different what-if scenarios. Oh, I said it at the bottom. Those 21 items are based on 3 things. So the point of case law in the United States is you have a constitution, which is our foundation document, and that's amended, and so you add the Bill of Rights to that. So the right to freedom of assembly, the right to bear arms, the right to free speech, all of those are protected rights. And then from that, you say, how does that apply in a certain situation? And so the question is, what happens when some of those are in conflict? You know, when someone, there's 2 different, I can't think of a good example, but so you build up case law over time and you'll do that, but it's based on certain foundation. So what's the foundation behind this? Remember what we've said, the 4 pillars of the book so far. God exists. Okay, God is unique. So he exists. He is the one who's the creator. He is the one who made the covenant with Israel. Okay, the next issue is he loves you, and therefore he's made a covenant with you. And the last one is he holds you accountable for the things that you do. Okay, so I'm going to say that all of this case law is built on that kind of a foundation. I'm going to put them with 3 C's. The first one is creation. We're going to go back and look. Some of these laws are based on the fact that of who God is, the fact that he's a creator, and in his creation, he has a design for certain things. And you're not supposed to violate his design. Okay? So 1, he's the creator. The second is covenant. He's made a relation with you. He's drawn up a contract. So there's actually 2 covenants. There's the Abrahamic covenant, which was unconditional. God's going to do this regardless of what Israel does. But this covenant, the Mosaic covenant, is based on their obedience, right? If you do that, remember we're going to come soon in the chapter, in the book, to the blessings and the cursings. If you do these things, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed. If you don't do these things, you're going to be cursed, you're going to be cursed, okay? So there is a conditional portion to that. So it's about creation, or it's about covenant, or it's about simply the right thing to do, based on the character of God. So the third one is character. So it's either creation, or it's covenant, or it's character. Okay, so let's go back. First one, Sam Ting. Your neighbor needs help. You're supposed to help him. So what's that all about? That's about character. You're doing the right thing, right? God says, here is what constitutes the right thing. It's all about the character, and it's based on the character of what God determines, God's basis of what's right. Okay? Don't mix gender apparel. So it would help to know that in the Canaanite religion, what they did is the priests would often dress up, priests of these cults would dress up as female figures in order to try and attract their god. Okay? So, but the point is, God created a man and he created a woman, and he has a role for a man and he has a role for a woman, and you're not supposed to violate that, right? So what's this about? This is about creation. It's about what God has designed. Okay? The next one. So this one is a little bit maybe hard to define as directly, but you find a bird in a nest with the children, the babes, and you save the mother, but you go ahead and take the eggs. What's that all about? In creation, remember what happened is God at the end said, I'm going to give you, or as part of this process, I'm going to give you, man, dominion over the earth, and you're to care for it and be a steward of it. And what happens is if you take the young, you can basically harvest the eggs, and if you leave the mother, then their egg's still there. The generation continues. If you take them all, then we wind up with extinct animals. You do this. So it's all about creation. It's all about stewardship in creation. Okay? Building a house and putting a parapet around it. What's that about? Watching out for your neighbor. What would you call that? Character. Yep. The next three: don't mix seeds, don't mix animals, don't mix materials, i.e. materials that are made from animals. So what's that all about? Again, that's creation. What happens is God has said, here's the function I have for an ox, here's how they work. Here's the function I have for a donkey and how they work. Here's what I have for seeds and how they work. And it's not just about the fact that a hybrid may be better in some cases, but this is about Israel being a demonstration to the nations of the character of God. So when they're being a witness to other nations, what is probably the most anathema thing in the whole book of Deuteronomy? You're going to go into this land and you will not be like this nation. Okay? You're going to be separate, you're going to be distinct, you're going to honor me, you're going to honor my creation, you're going to honor everything I do. These are all about creation. It's a picture of how God wants them to be, wants things to be separate. When God separates them, leave them that way. The last one, adding tassels. Well, that's covenant, because what it is a reminder of the covenant. It says in Numbers that's what the tassels are for, is a reminder of the covenant. Okay. So now we're back to the cases of various forms of infidelity. All of these every case revolves around the marital status of the girl, right? She's a virgin, and what she did what she did before she was married, or she's about to be married, or she's already married. all of those things. So, is marriage a covenant? Sure. So all of these are covenant laws. So it's basically saying you're going to treat the covenants that you make just like you treat the covenant that I make. If I make a covenant with you and I say, this is what I want you to do, and this is what I'm going to do, then you're going to treat your marriage covenants that same way, and you're going to keep them holy. And if you violate those, that's a capital offense. Okay? So those are all covenant. So, the next one, who can enter the assembly? All of these people who can enter the assembly, all that has to do with participating with the full religious worship of the country. So those are all about covenant. Okay, 23:9, going to war. So the point of this is that I'm making a covenant with you, and here's all the rules that you're supposed to obey when you're in the land. Okay, now, when you step over here and you go to war, what rules apply? Same thing, same ones, okay? So this is also about the covenant. It says war doesn't invalidate the covenant. I'm going to say both of the next two, which have to do with nighttime uncleanness and the cleansing to be clean again, and the idea of keeping a clean camp. I'm going to say those are also about covenant, because they're about the concepts of clean and unclean, and what constitutes clean and unclean, which is a covenant status. Okay, but now the last section, remember I said that read the heading and it's protection for the weak? So these are some about character and some about covenant. So if a slave escapes to you and basically has been mistreated, and you take mercy on him, that's about character, right? That's about doing the right thing. Cult prostitution, that's covenant. It's explicit exception. You shall not do this. Not only do you do this, you can't, the money from it, not only is the act wrong, the money from it is wrong, okay, and can't be used for anything. So that's all covenant. Not to lend money at interest for your countrymen. So someone needs help. So again, help is sort of the key word for character, right? So somebody comes to you and they need help, you're not to withhold help that you can provide, and you're not to charge them interest for that. Make a vow. A vow is a covenant, right? A vow is a promise, just like marriage is a covenant, just like the other things. So he's basically saying when you make a vow, recognize that you're walking into a covenant and you better fulfill it. It's all about covenant. Neighbors, grapes, and grain. I just put that's about character. It's about what you respect for another. So it's this is what's acceptable. To eat a handful is okay. To harvest is not. Okay, so you can see what's happened is these all sound like they're random and they sound like an odd collection of things, but they're all case law around a certain set of points. And the three main points are God and who he is, the fact that he's the creator. He expects to be respected as the creator. He expects them to portray to the world his nature as the creator, as the only God, Okay? It's all about the covenant that he makes with them and what their obligations are and what his obligations are. And it's all about character, how you act. This is the outworking of what God is like. So if God is like this, then how should you be? Okay, so now some application. Any of you remember the book, The Screwtape Letters? Yeah, C.S. Lewis. So it's a novel. It's a story about, and I don't remember the details too well, but the background is that there is a new young demon. His name is Wormwood. And his job is to seduce keep people from becoming Christians and to help them along to hell, okay? And then if they do become Christians, to make them ineffective, okay? And so he has a mentor who is his uncle, Screwtape. And so Screwtape writes him a series of letters to say, basically case law, letters to say, oh yeah, when this comes up, here's what you need to do. And yeah, I've seen this, and here's how. So it's sort of like a manual, a training manual for how he's supposed to undo Christians. Okay, so if this law in Deuteronomy, the three central things were creation, the covenant that God has with the people, and about the character and what kind of people they would be. If you were Screwtape, what would you do? Wouldn't you tell Wormwood that his job is to discredit those three things? Right? So, but surely no one in America would ever deny creation. No one in America would ever deny man and woman and the fact that when you're born a man, you're a man, and when you're born a woman, you're a woman, right? No one in America would ever try and break down the covenant of marriage and have it not be effective anymore, would they? No one in America would say that character doesn't matter, would they? So when I began to look at this, I thought, Moses is talking to them, and the same issues that he has with them, what they need to focus on is the character of the God of creation, what he is, what he's done, and how he's done, and they need to cling to that. And that's what they need to do. They need to cling to his covenant with them. Okay, so do we have a covenant with God? Okay, well, marriage is man and a woman, and we are the bride of whom? We're the bride of Christ, so we have a covenant relationship, okay, in the sense of like this covenant I said here. So, and it's all about character. It's all about if you know what is right and don't do it, that's sin. It's about staying in fellowship and doing what is right. So I thought, when I got all done, I thought, when I first read this chapter, I thought these are really sort of a collection of screwball rules for a bunch of screwball people. But I realized when you get done, it's all about creation and covenant and character. And that's just what our life is all about. So, anyway, I was psyched. That's good. Okay, next week we get to keep on keeping on with two more. We'll take two more chapters of case law, and then he's going to start to wrap it up and get into what is my favorite part of the book, which is the end of the book. So, okay. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for your character. Thank you for your plan and your purpose. And Thank you that we can wake up every day with the opportunity to do good and to praise you and to rejoice in your provision. On Easter particularly, we thank you for the Lord Jesus and for all that he did for us. And we just pray, Father, that you would help us to be focused on the things that are important and not get lost in the wormwoods of this world who are trying to lead us somewhere else. And Father, we thank you for how you provide. Pray for the rest of the time. Pray for Jeremy and his voice in the second hour and for all who come. In Jesus' name, amen.